Well, welcome everybody to the first of our EOCCS Community Webinars for 2022, and you are very, very welcome. What we've got for you today is a story to be told by three of the actors in the drama. Charlotte von Essen from Incendi, Nick Barneville from ESMT Berlin, and David Lefebvre from Imperial and Incendi. And we're going to tell you a story about setting up a program from scratch, or from soup to nuts, if we echo the title of this particular webinar. I'm hoping the food analogies don't go too far and we get we fail to get to dessert, but this is great for us. I mean, I'm just waiting for everyone to appear online, and whilst I did notice, and I can't see instantly in front of me, that we do have two registrants from Ukraine, and I wanted to mention that in particular to particularly welcome them, and you know, let's hope that you get something from this webinar, but also to mention to everyone, and I'm asking Teresa to put in the link to the EFMD Ukraine community page, because we're reaching out to business schools to network through us to really say, you know, yes, we can do a little bit of help, or we want to join with someone to help anything in that area, not just immediately, but in the future, because my goodness me, will there not be a rebuilding of everything physically and socially and educationally, and as we know, as many of us are educators, education is the basis of so much of society and the economy, and so it's a very important role. Let's hope we can all play our part in it. But for today, the story, and it is one I'm going to allow our speakers to unfold. The nature of this webinar is just a conversation, a discussion between the three participants, but spurred by every now and then a question from me to get them to sort of move the story on, but also questions from you. So please use the chat function to ask any questions, and if we haven't responded to them in the webinar itself, we'll respond to them at the end, where there'll be some time for direct questions and answers. So let us start. Let us go from soup to nuts, and can I please introduce to you Charlotte von Essen from Incendi, and she'll describe and let you know what Incendi is and does if you've not ever come across that company. Nick Barneville, Director of the EdTech Lab at ESMT Berlin, and Dr. David Lefebvre, Director of the EdTech Lab at Imperial in London. They have collaborated in their various ways on this. And I'm going to start by really asking Nick to, answer the question, how do you select the right strategy for, putting a program completely online? That's not everyone's first choice. Please help us understand, how do we go about starting that process?
Okay, thanks, Keith. Thank you for having me here, and I'm very happy to be together with Charlotte and David, because we've actually collaborated on getting my programs online. If I just take you back to about 2018, I didn't have a clue about anything to do with online education. So I was a regular associate dean for programs. I was running face-to-face programs. I was using Moodle in the way that many other people do. And we were getting a lot of requests in from, particularly from corporates, to deliver more blended programs and start some online programs, not necessarily on the degree side. So we had a big strategic question to answer then. And when I read from soup to nuts, that doesn't mean anything to me. But what I understand it actually maybe to mean, having discussed it, means how do you go from the idea of starting an online or a set of online programs to actually delivering one and having paying customers in the classroom? So that's what we're going to look at a little bit today. We're going to look at, first of all, my part is going to look at what decisions did we have to make in terms of getting started. And then we're going to hand over to Charlotte, who's going to talk more about, once you've decided on your approach, how do you actually do the design? David is going to talk about some of the challenges of delivery. And then Keith is going to come in and talk a little bit about, how do you make sure that it's good? What is the whole area of quality, and where does that play a role in online? So yeah, I've got the easy job because I get to take the big picture. So anyway, put yourself back again to 2018. I'm looking at this situation of I need a new learning experience platform, which is the new fancy word for learning management system in the online space, in my view. We've got Moodle, and we think, okay, what are we going to do? So we had a big strategic challenge at the school. Do we look at things ourselves, or do we try to find somebody external to partner with? And Teresa, I just have one slide I'm going to talk you through. We only have an hour for this entire webinar, so this is going to be a really, really quick overview. But if I start by what are the strategic options we had back in 2018 when we were looking at entering the online space, I'm going to look at the pros and cons of 3 different approaches, or 2.5 different approaches. Okay, so Teresa, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the first one there. So the first strategy is go it alone. So here was me, new in the ed tech space, saying, okay, go build an online program. We wanted to build an online degree very quickly after we decided to make the investment in online. We won a custom MBA contract for a corporate client. So we had to start delivering within 1 year. We had to have a program ready for launch. So we said, okay, can we do this ourselves? So go it alone was, okay, can we build something on Moodle that would be appropriate for the market? Or could we maybe get another LMS that we could replace Moodle with, like Canvas or something, And so we said, okay, there's some advantages to that. First of all, we can build on what we have already. Secondly, we get to keep all the money. So any money we make from student revenues, we would get to keep by doing this go it alone strategy. The third is nobody would be interfering with our brand. So we would have full control over all of the elements of the value chain, from marketing, student recruitment, student experience, through to alumni. And we wouldn't have to negotiate with anybody. We could just do it ourselves. So there were some things saying, okay, let's try and do this ourselves. However, then we looked at it and we said, well, we're going to need quite a bit of money for this. So how important do we think that developing competence in online delivery is for us in the long term? Turns out we felt it was very important. So we were prepared to get over the investment budget hurdle. Second was the legacy system was not designed online first. So anybody who's worked with Moodle or with Canvas will know that those systems are not designed for online learning. From a pedagogical perspective, they're just simply not as good as some other solutions out there in the market. Third, if we went on a go it alone strategy, we would have nobody to learn from. So we'd have to somehow figure everything out ourselves. Anybody who's dealt with the university IT team, unless they're very lucky, the IT team is generally extremely stretched and mainly concerned with network support and making sure that everything stays working, rather than how to develop a new platform with you. Maybe some of you are luckier than we were, but our team is very good but too small. And then digital marketing. Okay, another con of going it alone when entering online is you don't have anybody to sell the programs for you once you've built them. So okay, so option 1, park that for a second. Teresa, can we see option 2, please? So option 2 was kind of a go it alone plus. So we ended up going to talk to David at Imperial, who'll come and talk to you in a minute. And said, David, I'm on my search for an LMS that's developed online first, and I like what you have at Imperial. Can I use it, please? Can I pay you some money to use that? And I'm going to keep Moodle in the background for all my face-to-face programs, but I want to use your platform. Will you let me use it, please? I'll take you for some beers and I'll buy you some coffees and whatever. Luckily, David doesn't drink very much, so he's very cheap. So that was good. Okay, so what are the advantages there? Okay, so we could learn from peers and collaborate. It ended up anyway, I'll give away my secret, 4 four of us signed up to use the same platform that spun out of Imperial called Incendi. And we had the advantage of, all of the go it alone advantages. Plus we could learn from our peers and collaborate. We were using a shared platform. We could learn what the others were doing in all areas of developing the programs. So we weren't sort of on our own in this. We could retain all the revenues, and we could also, as a group, influence the platform owners subsequently, because the platform got taken over by study group. But we could influence the platform roadmap a little bit. So this consortium approach was looking very good for us. However, there were some challenges. Challenges were, okay, how do we align all the various interests across the different schools who are working on the same platform? How do we prioritize? We might want something on this platform, but somebody like Imperial might want something else. Or I noticed there's some friends here from BI Norwegian Business School who signed up with us at the very beginning on this platform as well. I see Martin there. How do we align these different interests? We still needed to build all our own internal resources, which we came from no experience, but luckily we could leverage the community to build on those skills internally. But we would still have to keep all the market risks. So we had to secure this financial investment from our effectively approval to spend money from our supervisory board before we were going to see any return. And then we also have the problem of digital marketing. How are we going to establish our own digital marketing capability? The third option, which many of you will be looking at or maybe have looked at, is the online program manager option. Teresa, maybe if you could pull that one up. So the OPM, so many of you are already working with OPMs. I apologize if this is all too simple for most people here, because many of you know this already. I'm really setting the scene for the others. But the OPMs were, we spoke to people like to you and to Emeritus, and so there's many OPMs. Higher Education Partners is another one. There's a lot of them around these days, and they promise various things which seem very attractive. And I'm not here to knock OPMs, because some of you will find that OPMs are definitely the right strategy for you, because they have huge advantages in a few areas. You get quick revenues for very low financial risk. So you don't have to make upfront investment. The financial risk is borne by the online program manager. You get pretty professional content development in general, so they know what they're doing. They build the content with your faculty. They have experience in building portfolios, so they can advise you on what type of programs are likely to be successful or not. The platforms are generally acceptable. I wouldn't say they're necessarily best in class, but let's say they're acceptable. It's comfortable for faculty, and the online program manager will do all the recruiting for you. And you can literally sit back as a relatively passive partner, provide faculty expertise, and get paid for the privilege. However, there are some things that we couldn't swallow at ESMT. The revenue split, which typically starts at 50-50 in favor and goes up in favor of the OPM, is a bitter pill. We think developing competence in building our own online programs is going to be so important for us for the future. So that was already a knockout for us. We said we can't do that. The contractual lock-ins are very long. I mean, the OPMs need long contractual lock-ins because they have to spend a huge amount of money upfront marketing to try and build some demand for your programs if you're working with them. And I don't think we felt that there was going to be enough internal capacity building if we went with an OPM. Another final stumbling point was that we really, on the degree side, we really wanted to keep control of our sales process and our student experience process. So we didn't want to outsource that, because that's a key element of who we are, is the community that we're part of. So we really wanted to keep that close to ourselves. So we decided to go with the Go to Low Plus consortium concept. David led us in. Charlotte was also there from the beginning at Incendi and helped us, actually trained our learning designers to learning design. And within 12 months, we were fully independent as a learning design and ed tech team building our online MBA. With that, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte. I'm sorry for talking quickly at you and probably for too long, but we'll take questions afterwards.
Thank you, Nick. You set that up marvelously. And Charlotte, we're going to ask you to share with us, what are the principles, and I mean enshrined in Incendi as well, what are the key principles that you use for the learning design for what ESMT actually wanted? How were you able to tailor that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the question here really is, how do you operationalize the strategy? Once you've got to that point, you've made the decision to go for it. How do you actually go about it? So what we did at ESMT was we set a broad sort of design plan at a program level. We had a sort of flagship digital project to work around, something really concrete that we wanted to execute and bring to market. And then we discussed what the design parameters would be, what kind of structure we would work to. And against that, we could plan back in a development timeline, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. But there are some basic structural considerations, and these include things like how many learners you're anticipating on the program. Will there be multiple entry points in the year? Will you run a kind of carousel model? Will the modules be cohort-based and paced, or more asynchronous? Will they run in conjunction, or will they run progressively? Are there any kind of pedagogical dependencies within the program? And of course, then you can start thinking about actually the different components of a program. How many courses or modules will there be in total? How will they run in delivery? Will they be standalone or stackable? What credit weighting will they have? What kind of bank of electives will you look to construct and offer learners? And then each, it's very useful then to take those as sort of individual modules and try and set a framework against which you can design to. So how many weeks or sessions will each course be taught over, if it's going to be a paced course? So that's really important. And again, how many learning hours will each unit aim for? So really, you can do some basic maths and just work out, what kind of time commitment you're going to ask from your students on this particular program. If a lot of online programs are designed for part-time study, so how thinking through actually from a learner perspective how that will work with the rest of their life and their families and travel and all the other commitments that they have. And then once you have that program structure, that framework, that skeleton in place, you can go down and think about those modules and if there might be other criteria that you want to set. How many live classes might there be? What might the balance between synchronous and asynchronous work be? How much video per session or unit you might include? How to get the right kinds of collaborative work or group work? Is there good opportunities for individual / group work? Would there be, do certain modules need access to third-party digital resources? And of course, a very big consideration is just working out how assessment will function at a top level. Will there be continuous assessment, group assessment, exams? What accommodations or considerations will be needed for online learners in this case? And even at this level, even if things are sort of sketched out, it gives you those parameters are really useful for when you go to then actually start planning out your development. And it's also worth noting that at this stage, it can be really useful to think about the entire learner experience. So think about any of those wraparounds like masterclasses or fireside chats and guest speakers, things like careers, pastoral care, residentials, even case competitions. And at Incendi, we've done that. We often sit down with our partners to do this program level design work. And it can be really rich and really useful and can give you that structure to work to. And when you've got that, we can then move on to the question of development. And we can work back and think about in what order do modules need to be developed, which faculty need to be involved, how will they be supported. At Incendi, we use quite a rich, collaborative, creative process where faculty are paired up with learning designers and have that conversation, have that creative spirit to be able to really interrogate the pedagogies that you're using. And there are actually just a number of sort of phases, high-level phases, including a kind of draft and planning stage, including outlining the main content of the units, storyboarding that and going into the detail and thinking about the scripts or the feedback or the extra resources that need to be created. There's usually a process of extra materials that need to be brought to life. Of course, then faculty are asked to go into the studio. They might have to do some filming. And then we move those assets into post-production, so to make sure that everything is of very high quality. And as the course is being built out, we usually include, quite a rigorous quality assurance process to make sure that everything is as it should be, as it's intended to be, and that it's going to have maximum impact on the student. And you can break this down into a process flowchart and then find it easier to plan and track the development of each of the modules which make up the program. And when everything goes well, hopefully you'll have a batch of courses which are then ready for delivery, ready for real students. And that probably is a good point for David to come in and talk about the specificities of delivering online courses.
Indeed, and I'll bring David in there and say, you know, none of these things, soup to nuts, but what if the entree is late to the table? You know, there's always going to be some glitch along the way. What are the big barriers or the big areas of problems with delivery, and how might you get around them?
Well, I think if I try to sort of make a segue between you know, what Charlotte's been saying and what I've been saying, what I'm planning to say, I think the easiest thing in the world, actually not the easiest thing in the world, I think that the natural inclination of all of us in business schools who are planning an online degree is to try and create an online version of our existing program. You know, so we create online versions of it, we keep the curriculum the same. We have a similar administration and support team. We have the same teachers teaching in a similar manner, and perhaps not quite the teaching via Zoom that we were all forced to do during the pandemic, but maybe similar in approach to that. We tend to deliver online degrees in the way that we deliver our face-to-face programs, and sometimes we might plan a different approach, but because all of the staff involved have done it in a particular way for years, they deliver it in the same way again. But I think you know, what Charlotte's really outlined is it's a much better approach to think, what is the student experience we want to deliver? And of course, that starts with what are the aims of the particular program, because the aims of an MBA program are very different to the aims of a MSc program. So really, I think that the task is to think about what kind of student experience is going to deliver the outcomes of these programs. And I think if you take a few days out of your regular work and sit around a table with colleagues and really think that through, then you'll end up with something that's very different to the obvious move, which is replicating what you do face-to-face online. And I think once you think that through, you then need to do everything in a slightly different way. And this is where you come into all the detail that Charlotte has just outlined, the myriad of different approaches and strategies. You really, to deliver online learning well, everybody has to do their job in a slightly different way. And it becomes a detailed planning process, you know, scoping out the whole experience in whatever software program you want to use, and then going through the detail of enacting that. So I think the enormous step is attention to detail and much more upfront planning than you do for a face-to-face program. And I think that's kind of the segue to what can go wrong, because in summary, what can go wrong is not giving these programs due care and attention to detail. So I've got a slide here. I don't know if you can all see this. So, yeah. So what I've tried to do here is a bit sort of address this question from Keith in a bit more of a positive manner. You know, so rather than sort of listing out all the things that could go wrong, I've sort of listed out the things that you do to stop things going wrong while you deliver the program. And I'll just talk through them. So the first one is teaching. And the key question is, who is going to do what? Because are you going to have the senior professor doing all of the tasks? Are you going to have team teaching where you have a more junior member doing some of the tasks? What are these tasks? Because if you just don't give attention to this, you may find that the professors assume they give those synchronous classes and don't do anything else. Whereas actually, in online teaching, there's a whole range of activities that the teachers can do to add value and assist the students. So really that deserves thought. Who are the teachers going to be? and what tasks are you going to ask them to perform, and how are you going to train them to do that, and so on and so on. The second one is community. So if you don't give attention to community, then it can be online programs can be a very isolating experience for students. You know, this is the continual feedback we get if we don't give attention to this. So it's very important from the outset to form relationships between community members. I mean, ideally, with a face-to-face orientation, that might not be possible. But if you can introduce everybody to each other, you know, the students to the students, the students to the staff to the professors, and so on, and form those relationships, then there'll be much greater sense of community and a greater sense of peer-to-peer learning and a sense of engagement with the program. So, you know, one of the things that can go wrong is students become isolated and drop out of these programs. And one of the key things to stop people doing that is to build community. Then if we look at synchronous study, live classes. So again, if you don't give attention to this, then the obvious thing to do is to do exactly the same classes that you were going to do, that you do face-to-face online. And hopefully during the pandemic, we've all learned that this doesn't work. And another thing that can go wrong is that attendance to those live classes starts to decline. And you see this again and again and again and again. So you need to consider what you're going to do in those live classes. And I've listed here some of the things that you know, we found work for us at Imperial and across the Incendi network of business schools. So of course, case study discussions are much better done in a synchronous mode than asynchronous. Q&As on topics that students have found difficult, students presenting each other's work, revision class ahead of the exam might be the most attended form of these live classes that you deliver, and so on and so on. Next is the asynchronous study, which doesn't get much attention. This is students studying through the materials outside of those synchronous classes. And one very important measure here is to really make it clear to the students what they need to perform and when. And many LMS systems actually make this quite difficult by putting all the readings in one particular bucket and putting the videos in another bucket, etc. But it's very important to work hard to ensure students know exactly what they need to do and when, because these students are time poor. Another thing to consider, especially if you're doing technical subjects like analytics or finance, is to consider what support do students have when they become stuck, because they will become stuck. They're new to this stuff. They're often doing highly technical subjects. What do they do? Are you going to leave them to support each other? Are you going to assume they're going to sort of search Google, or are you going to give them access to some kind of support? And again, that's a key kind of factor in student satisfaction. I'll speed up now, Keith. I know I'm running out of time. So analytics, needless to say, analytics are very important. But again, this needs to be planned. It's hugely useful to know what the students are doing. And then, of course, having a range of interventions you can make based on things you find in those analytics. Perhaps students not engaging in the same pattern, which is a signal that they're having some kind of problem, and so on and so on. So, a program around how you're going to use analytics is very important. If the question is, what are the key issues encountered with the delivery of the program? The problems that really flare up relate to assessment. The students are remote, they're kind of on their own, they're stressed because of these assessments, and then maybe the technology fails 5 minutes before the deadline. So a great deal of attention needs to be given to the assessments, more than any other aspect of the program. And perhaps the biggest suggestion is to make everyone in the program, whether it's the students, the professors, the administration, prepared for the technology failing, because it will fail. Students' Wi-Fi will go down, the technology might go down, and everyone needs to know what to do when it does, because otherwise it's an enormous cause of stress. And then the last one is administration. And administration needs to be done, I believe, in a completely different way online and face-to-face. So when you're face-to-face on campus, then students typically come to you if they have questions. They'll knock on your door, You can see if there may be, you know, that you can see their manner and their behavior. You can identify problems and talk to them. But in online education, you have to be more active. You have to reach out to them, you know, call them, check in with them, ensure that you know, they are progressing and they are happy with their experience. Communications have to be crystal clear, because you don't have the same sense of peer-to-peer, bumping into corridors, etc. on online programs. And it's also very important for administration to form relationships with students. So you need to give a lot of consideration to how many students you have for how many administrators. Because if you have 1,000 students on your program and one administrator, then the students aren't going to form those vital relationships with their administrators. So there you go, Keith, there's the answer to the question. I've tried to frame it in a kind of more positive light, and I hope that was useful.
Thank you very much, David. And say I've got an eye on the clock. I mean, we do plan these webinars to a certain extent, but I do want to give plenty of time for people to ask their individual questions based on those things. And I've been given the opportunity to really rehearse, you know, well, how do we know it's any good? You know, you've got it, you've planned it, you've done it, you've used the expertise. How does it stack up? And of course, that's where, and I would say this, wouldn't I? That's where EOCCS comes in, the EFMD Global Online Course Certification System. And I'm going to use that simply as a framework to sum up what we've heard today. And then I'm going to ask a question about those analytics. I think that's a very important thing that online gives us that face-to-face very often doesn't. So I'm going to share my screen with you, yet another picture in front of you. And I said we were telling a story today, and our EOCCS Standards are a story with 4 chapters. First chapter is, does the institution actually, can it sustain this online? Is it just a one-off, or is it part of the strategy? Is it part of the institution's DNA? We look also at the course delivery and operations and the course composition. So the content, it's management education that EOCCS looks at, EFMD looks at, but is it up to date? Is it current? Is it you know, with all of the things in that are needed for it? We also ask about, I mean, the new thing on the book, they're not really new, but the micro credentials. We're not talking about this today with an MBA program, but where do micro credentials come in this? Because a lot of those are online. And on our course composition as well, we of course in EFMD have a number of transversal issues: internationalization, corporate links, and the sort of ethics and sustainability areas that we hope that business schools embrace. But where I wanted to look was that the quality assurance processes, which begin with, you know, who's allowed onto the program in the first place, what about the recruitment, and goes through with, and how are students supported. So I do want to, after doing that quick advert for EOCCS, do want to sort of turn back to those who have seen this program run and say, actually, what's meaningful in the quality assurance? What sort of things are we learning from running these that then feed back into developing and improving them? I don't know who might want to take that question.
David, I can start. So what are we learning from our I think the first indicator of quality for us is retention and continuation. So if we take our global online MBA program that we launched in September, we gave students the option of paying per module. So you don't have to sign up for the full, you have to get admitted, but you can sign up and pay for each module as you take it. And if we started the program with 47 students taking the first module, and all 47 signed up for the second module. So for us, that's the first indication of something is working. Then I think the real challenge, particularly when you're new in this, is to really engage in an in-depth conversation with smaller groups of students to understand where they're having challenges with their learning. particularly around time. It takes a while to really understand that you can actually get through less material in an online environment than you can in a face-to-face environment. So, you know, calibrating the amount of material you have versus the time expectations you have of your students is something that can only be done. Well, you can do it through learning analytics to a certain extent and observe how long people are taking on particular segments of a course. But I think through the in-depth conversations with the students, you'll find out, you know, whether people are spending more or less time. Also building in sort of self-assessments into the whole learning process, asking students how they're feeling about their own assessment of their own achievements after doing a particular piece of online learning. There's a lot of opportunity to get data on how students feel about their own performance that you can't really get to the same extent in face-to-face teaching. They're just a few examples of where I would start using the student perspective, and maybe throw it over then to David to talk about sort of a more institutional quality metrics for the program.
Yep, sure. I'm happy to comment on this. I mean, I think my view is that I think there's metrics. We want measures, and that's what we want. We don't want a sort of connoisseur's approach. You know, I look at it and I make a judgment. We want sort of measures and metrics, and I think what we found is that some metrics are very useful and some metrics aren't. So useful metrics, I'd put in that performance, perhaps comparing performance to face-to-face programs. I put in student satisfaction in there. And I'd include the regular metrics that we use to assess other programs, such as you know, the criteria used in the various different rankings, like do students achieve the career outcomes and salary increase that they're targeting, and so on and so on. I think metrics fall apart when you try and put numbers on the pedagogy. So there are some rankings which I won't name, which you know, include measures such as hours of synchronous classes, you know, and by that measure, what we did during the pandemic would have scored very, very highly. But the you know, volume of synchronous classes is not does not correlate to, you know, perceived quality of the program. So I think there's useful measures. I mean, we should certainly judge programs the way we judge all other programs. And then there's non-useful measures. And my personal view, I hate to say it now, is that in the eyes of students and staff and everyone else, there is a degree of connoisseurship here. You know, if you show students a particular experience, they realise that it's you know, good quality, and you show them other ones, it's not. So you know, that makes it very difficult for people such as Keith to produce evaluation criteria. But I think you know, course design and programs is an art that cannot always be captured by metrics. I'm not sure how you deal with that.
Okay, thank you very much, David. We're beginning to get some questions into the chat. Manzoor, can I ask you to switch your microphone off, please? Thank you. We're beginning to get some questions into the chat, and I think with the number of people we've got here, can I ask if Helen, who's put our first question in, and asking for suggestions on building community, if you'd like to open your microphone and ask the question, and we'll let our panelists give a go at answering it.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you for this so far. So I agree that I think the issue of creating a student community is like completely core here. And when Eilish was showing me the demonstration of Incendi, one of the things that I liked in there was you could see when somebody else from the cohort was online at the same time, so you could connect with them, which is a nice little feature. But I've looked at things like, you know, virtual campuses where they could walk around in a kind of a Lego world, etc., and all this stuff to try and think about how an alternative space could be created in which they can create community themselves. So the question really is, how do we go about facilitating that? How do we get them to do it? Because community has to be born from initiative as well. So yeah, I'd be really, really interested to hear some suggestions about how other people are doing this and what the best way is. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
I can jump in there. so there are many different forms of technology out there, and lots of experimental people who can, look at these technologies, and I think that, see some possibilities. But I think there's sometimes a bit of a danger of being too technology led and actually getting, asking the right questions to begin with when you're doing the design work, and then letting that feed into actually making the right technological decisions. And you're absolutely right. If there's one thing that we've learned through the pandemic, it's this sense of togetherness, inclusion, a sense of collaboration and togetherness just really matters for online. And at Incendi, the data that we've collected shows that groups and teams sometimes take longer online to form, to get those bonds. But once they do, they're very strong, and they become a kind of family, a kind of online family and they provide a kind of, the part of the wellness of a learner, as well as, being able to interact on an academic level. So I think it's very much about thinking about how you set the climate from that when you're doing that program design, and how you balance that. And it might be there might be technology solutions, but there might also be things like, onboarding students face to face, or doing residentials, or having other kinds of techniques and strategies that can bring that sense of, galvanize that sense of togetherness, and that can lead to that better outcome, better social outcomes, and better social learning.
I just want to give another example of something that's worked pretty well for us. So we don't use Zoom for our live lectures. We use software called Engagely, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's really fantastic. It's started by the people from, somebody from Coursera and somebody from 2U, and so just kind of big names and quite a bit of money behind them. But it's a sort of much more simulated real class environment where people that are at tables and they engage with each other. But what they can do after their lectures is they can revisit the lecture hall together as a group, and they can watch the lecture again together and go through the material for their group exercise. So what we encourage people to set up meetings to review the lecture material themselves, or to review the class material themselves in a group, and just by creating occasions other than maybe you can set up group forums, etc., in Incendi or on any platform. But I think some of the technology solutions out there at the moment that really add value to students also create community. I mean, there are others which, you can get students together for social things using wonder.me or something like that, and that's fine. But, that's kind of, that doesn't always work. I mean, the student themselves have to be really, really interested in being part of a community for that. But some of the other things that really facilitate their learning, there are lots of cool technologies around that help that. But I think, as Charlotte said, you need to have the concept first and then find the technology that will support that.
And I think sorry, David, I'll let you come in, but I know there's a parallel here with some of our other webinars where we've looked at simulations that can be used, business simulations that can be used to build those sort of induction, or even embedded into courses that ensure students are working together. David, you had a comment there.
Yeah, I just build on what Charlotte was saying about the role of meeting face to face. I mean, I think one outcome of the pandemic is that it's crystallized the importance of face to face for community building. And examples of how we do that on the Imperial program are, first of all, the MBA kicks off with an induction week. It's a 1-week residential. They stay in the same hotel. They're together from breakfast to dinner. And the sole purpose of that is to form strong human relationships. And we typically put cohorts of around 90 students through this program, through this induction at a time. And at the end of it, all students know each other, and they know the staff, they know the support staff, and that really sets the program off on a strong foot. We also have regional meetups, so I think all of us running online programs typically have hubs, in obvious major cities, for example, and encouraging and sending staff out to these hubs and encouraging regional meetups, encouraging students to meet up in groups, very important. We also create, they go on study tours with our campus-based students. They can come and take electives on campus at Imperial should they choose. So I think, yes, you want to leave that, some students need the flexibility of a fully online program, but you can create opportunities for them to meet. And I think these face-to-face opportunities really do enhance the student, enhance the experience, and they do so by forging this community. And needless to say, that's especially important on programs such as MBA programs, where the network and the nature of the material requires a very strong community.
Thank you very much, all of you. Have we had any more questions that are burning a hole in your minds? I know we've talked, and these things are very much focused on students, but is there any feedback so far on what students think about this? I mean, are they choosing online, or are they choosing an MBA and trying out the online? What's their take on it?
I'll take that. I think when people say they're happy or unhappy with online learning, it all depends on their expectations going in. So if you have full-time students who have been transitioned to emergency remote learning, they're desperately unhappy. That's not what they wanted. But if you have a suite of programs and one of them's an online program, then typically your students will be at least as happy as your full-time students. They're just choosing it for a very different reason. They know what they're buying, and they're happy with what they're buying as long as it's properly constructed and delivered. So I think it really depends on who you are as a customer, what you actually want as a learner, So our typical course evaluations are a tick above the face-to-face evaluations in our online programs, which surprised us a little bit. But then we spoke to people, and it's really about the expectations. There was a question there from David Bach from IMD. Hi, David, about what we would do differently on the second run of our program, which is we're starting the second run of our online MBA starting in May. And from a learning perspective, it's really tweaking the programs, tweaking the courses to make them more engaging, to make them more interactive, and trying to analyze where students maybe fall off, or where people simply aren't engaging with the material, and deleting that and trying to replace it with more engaging content. We're not as sophisticated that we can see all that from data, so we have to do that by interviewing our students and talking to groups of them and figuring out, what is it that they're finding difficult. But one of the things that we are really going to do is we're going to try and invest in scale, because we are very positively surprised at the feedback from our learners. We went in at a competitive price on our program. You have to have something unique about your program when you go in. I don't think there's any room in the online market to do the same as anybody else is doing, unless you've got the strongest brand in the world. And all the strong brands are already doing something. So we went in at a premium business school at a competitive price in the online space, and we think it's a hit. We didn't go with an online program manager, so what we're trying to do now is release more investment money to spend more on marketing the program, because really when we get scale, we can offer more choice and we can offer more accessibility, etc. So that's our plan.
Thank you very much, Nick. We've got a couple of other questions, and we'll try and squeeze in before the end of our hour. Dennis Fishbacker-Smith, if you'd like to open your mic and ask that question. I think it's within your question, there's a very good point about faculty.
I think it's a core issue that online learning is fundamentally different to face-to-face or face-to-face blended, however you choose to define those parameters. And I think over the years, I've heard colleagues wax lyrical about what online learning should be like, but they've no experience of it as a student. And you could almost argue that it should be a requirement for staff to at least engage in some online learning, so that they've been in that student position in order to help with the delivery of it.
I think that's an excellent idea, Dennis. And I was working with a very large institution recently who recognised this problem and put all of the board of the institution through an online pilot program to solve that problem. And I think, yeah, better understanding from the leadership of any organization is going to help. Yeah.
So not just the faculty putting the bosses in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, that does give us, and we're not done with all the questions yet, but done with a very good link to someone who's joined us from IE Madrid, Martin Rodriguez, because he can tell us about an offering that EFMD have called the Online Teaching Academy, which is an opportunity for staff members to actually learn about online teaching and learning online. Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Keith, and thank you, everybody. Thanks, Nick, David, Charlotte, for the session today. I mean, it has been very, very inspiring, very interesting one. And thank you for giving me the opportunity, because we are going to have another intake of the Online Teaching Academy, which is a course that I teach with Sarah Grant from Imperial. And the next intake is going to be blended, having an online component, I mean, a first week, which will be fully online, starting the 23rd of May. And then we're going to have a residential period in Rome, in Lewis Business School, the 31st of May, and the 1st of June. So 3 very immersive days in Rome. Okay, so the idea here is that we focus on different elements of online education. We're going to be trying to understand the different formats, covering online methodologies, the principles of, and concepts of instructional design. We will also cover how to teach online, case studies online. We're going to have also a lot of discussions around how to face challenges in your institutions, how to face all the situations and understanding the different, let's say, contexts that you may have in your institutions, and how to understand the different stakeholders that you have in this, and so that you can, let's say, implement new strategies in the online arena, and understanding what type of things you need. And this course, I mean, this workshop with the online and the residential period will have a very strong practical approach. In fact, during the program, participants are going to have the possibility to put in practice all the things we are going to be seeing during the course, and actually, transforming, which is the best word I use, transforming a course that is typically, let's say, delivered in person to an online version or a blended version. So again, if you are interested in more information about this, please contact Teresa, who is here hosting us, which is because this course is part of an EFMD offering. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you very much, Martin. And back, I think we've just got time for a final question, and our panelists might all have a go at this, and it's from Ji Lai Choi. Are you able to open your microphone and ask your question?
Hello, yes, thank you very much. Now I am a director of an undergraduate program in business administration, and we are thinking about going online. But I have a dilemma. I don't know if that online program will be a direct competition for my current program, face-to-face.
David.
I just put a note in the chat. I mean, I can talk about the postgraduate space. Online students are looking for an online program. They're not choosing between your different programs in your portfolio. They're choosing between the different schools that offer an online program. And campus-based students want a campus-based program. They don't want an online program. So if you offer an online version of a program, these typically don't cannibalize each other. And I think the other thing to say is, because of this, if you don't offer an online program, then students who want to study at your school will be taken elsewhere. So I think it's a common concern, Most of the schools we've worked with have raised this. But our experience in the postgraduate space is that they're two very different markets. Undergraduate is different, I think. I mean, primarily the undergraduate space is for campus-based students, 18 to 21-year-olds, where I think the online undergraduate space is still emerging and unproven. But it does seem to be that the market for online undergraduate degrees is an older cohort. Typically people who are maybe have already done a degree elsewhere or doing a degree for the first time as a working adult. But there seems to be a distinction between the market for campus-based undergraduate, which is your classic 18 to 21, and online postgraduate, which is older. But again, this market is still emerging. I think it's hard to say for sure.
I would echo that, David. I would say, the worst thing you could do is not try it, because somebody else will take your students if you don't. I think there's probably very little overlap between an undergraduate online profile and a face-to-face profile. I think your bigger worry is probably whether there's a market there for it at all in your context, rather than whether you're going to cannibalize your face-to-face program. But if you believe that there is a market, I'd say it might be nice to get in there first and to try it.
Okay, well, I'm very sorry to have to be the one to draw this marvellous discussion to a close. Thank you all for staying the course of the hour, and I hope you stay in touch with us. If it's your first time on one of our community webinars, then please look out for others if you think this has been valuable to you. And as we showed with Martin's input there, we have a lot more to offer in this space. Just ask, and we're happy to discuss those things. But can I, on behalf of everyone, thank Charlotte, Nick and David for their inputs today, and we wish you all, wherever you may be, a very good rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.